And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Valley of the Judged. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me, I have my good brother here in the temple, the man behind the Wanderer's Library and continuing his crusade to run through Doom in time for the Dark Ages, good brother Sig.
And, I mean, I'm almost through it. I'm at the last game. It's just, the levels of Doom Eternal are just so long, but
So I'm
going to power through it one way or another.
You're at the Ancient Gods Part 2?
I am not at the Ancient Gods yet. I'm only halfway through the main campaign right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, you gotta do the Ancient Gods if you're gonna have this be as complete as you want it.
Oh, that's in the plans. It's like, these are the last two things on my list, and that's probably going to take maybe a week.
Mm-hmm.
At most.
Yeah. But we after our brief aside with that double feature, we are back with a full new season. FangKnight wasn't the original one we were going to do, but let me give you all a bit of a history lesson into how we got here. So, after we finished the in-between episode, I was waffling back and forth about what the next focus was going to be. And then I DM'd Sig going, what genre would you like to go into?
And answering, I came into horror because there are so few horror RPGs that I've actually covered and, have myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I gave a short list of horror entries. I believe on that list was, let's see, Terrors and Tommy Guns, which I have done a review about years ago, Triangle Agency, which I've also done a review about, and Witch Hunter: The Invisible Ward, which I have not done a interview about.
I was kind of between the Cthulhu one and the Witch Hunter one. It was like, because the middle one, I was like, I feel like I've seen this a lot before, and I wanted something a little different.
Mm-hmm. That was the initial plan. Then my old boss, Mark Reinhagen, decided to throw a monkey wrench into the situation. And that was done through the public playtest edition of FangKnight. Now, Zen and I had covered an earlier iteration of FangKnight about 2 years ago. And originally there were plans on doing a Kickstarter for FangKnight, but because of the terror situation, it was decided to pivot into this open playtest. Now, I will note, in the interest of full disclosure, I have covered this on multiple occasions. I have interviewed Mark Reinhagen multiple times, whether it be for the Curse of Bloodstone Isle, which was a 5e module that involved vampire pirates.
That sounds pretty badass.
Or Badlander, which was originally going to be the first entry in the Tailspinner universe. And then FangKnight. Plus, I am technically on the media team for Lost Lorne Games.
Nice.
I have to note that in the interest of full disclosure, because I, unlike some, have some degree of ethics. Now, back then, the way I described FangKnight is a mixture of elements of things between Vampire and Ars Magica. 2 games that Mark Reinhagen has been heavily involved in the creation of.
And 2 games I'm not terribly familiar with, so I'm actually really excited about this one.
Yeah, like Vampire the Masquerade, that's one of the stalwarts. It created a ripple effect throughout the 90s, and it was amusing when I learned that the big inspiration for that game was the movie Lost Boys.
Good movie.
Good movie, a very good case against anyone who says that Joel Schumacher is a shit director.
Right.
Like, yeah, the Batman movies he did weren't good, but he was not a scrub when it came to directing.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm being honest, I think some of the critiques that get thrown at Schumacher because of those Batman movies lean a little bit homophobic.
Mm.
There were
Nobody's
some
perfect.
some people who took it too far.
Yeah, fair.
But with things like Lost Boys, which I still have Cry Little Sister on one of my playlists. But it's interesting where things end up going. And Ars Magica, which recently had a definitive edition release on BackerKit, is a medieval fantasy passion play. Part of the reason why it's referred to as that is it's kind of built on this idea that you are playing wizards who are affiliated with a hermetic order in medieval Europe, borderline Renaissance Europe. And the passion play part is there is a inbuilt assumption that you're going to be playing as multiple characters depending on where the story goes. Much in the same way that you have multiple subcasts of characters in a actual passion play or a opera.
That's very different.
And because of that, it's kind of built with this idea that you don't have one character, you have a small roster of characters that you're going to be switching between. And the Tailspinner universe, which the first of which is going to be FangKnight, I guess. It's kind of a marriage of elements between those two worlds. The premise with FangKnight is you are vampire knights whose holdings are above hellholes.
Don't get the Slayer in here.
No, but occasionally you will go down into those hellholes. And there are plans on other archetypes throughout this Tailspinner universe, because this is the big thing that he's been working on for the longest time. Now, Tailspinner does use the D20 system, but I would hesitate to call this 5e compatible at any point, especially with how the thing is designed, especially when I had you go through a bit of a preview of what we were dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see, where the D20 elements would work, but not for something like 5e.
I only point that out because some people have a brain rot where if a game uses a D20, then it automatically is 5e adjacent.
Well, you know what they say about assuming.
Yeah. It makes an ass out of you and Ming. Sorry, Ming.
Exactly.
But we are going to be going through the playtest version of FangKnight, and I will note there is a spot on the official subreddit for FangKnight, which I do have in the description on the YouTube version of this episode, where you can sign up to get the playtest. Now, this is a beefy book. It is 292 pages. I will have to note one thing off the bat. Even though this is a playtest, no bookmarks is a red flag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've only gone through some of the first part, and this bad boy is dense.
Mm-hmm. But I suppose one of the early things to point out is the visual approach. And obviously this is a playtest version, so take a lot of it with a grain of salt. It is amusing that the image you see right now with the lady knights with that was the cover art for one of the previous iterations we had.
Mm-hmm.
But I will note that I'm not a big fan of the way the table of contents is laid out. This is laid out in a way that a lot of White Wolf games were laid out in terms of table of contents, and I wasn't a fan of it then, and I'm still not a fan of it. This idea of just having the chapter note and none of the contents within the chapter.
Mm-hmm. So it's hard to differentiate, which page you need to go to depending on what you need to reference.
It also meant laying out the way we structure things for this series was going to be a tricky affair. But we're going to be going into the introduction proper, as well as the concept of the Bloodless. And I do appreciate the teaser that we have here. Hearken to a somber tale, wherein is recounted the vampire's plight to subsist and flourish in a perilous existence within Firehold and Law, beset by foes both within and without, set in a realm teetering on the brink of renewal and revolution, and imperiled by infernal and blighted perils. Thou art the fulcrum of history. Though suited to the palate of all those with dauntless spirit, this grim chronicle proffers a substantive fare, most appealing to those of darker tastes, and serves to animate the most grisly of reveries. It presents a baleful shift in the genre of dread fable, wherein thou play the monster, yet seek to become more human. Bring your nightmares to life.
When I read that, I was hooked.
I seem to be getting better at doing the sales pitch for certain works, because, earlier in the week when we were doing the III Initiatives stream, and Team had asked me to pitch Painkiller, and I said, "You have a gun that shoots shurikens and lightning," and that was all that was needed.
For me, if any game has a good shotgun, I'm all for that.
A good shotgun is a good measuring stick on that regard.
Yes, indeedy.
But let's see, it goes into the opening step we have here is going into rolling the dice. This is more about the general theme of things. As well as the general themes within the Lost Lore universe. I'm not going to call it the Lost Verse. That's stupid. But, then it's going into the core things when it comes to what you do in an RPG. The base mechanic is ability plus skill plus d20. Difficulty ranges from 10 to 30. And much like with, say, World of Darkness, instead of numbers for each, you have dots.
In this case, diamonds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is built on what's known as the Tailspinner 20 system. There is some, I guess 5e like DNA that you will see, but it's not like you could take a D&D character from any edition and port it over here without having to make some painful cuts.
Yeah.
The version of Tailspinner 20 that we have for FangKnight is built for FangKnight. But this, and I think I recall that at one point it was a bit closer to it, but then the OGL fiasco happened, we've covered that. We've covered that quite a bit. I feel like I feel like me saying the OGL fiasco is like Civi saying Half-Life.
And whenever I hear the term OGL, it's like, why am I getting this sense of deja vu?
Look, a lot of games used it for the last 25 years,
Mhm.
and when that thing happened, it was going to cause massive ripple effects throughout the whole industry.
Mhm.
So, when we're talking about the development of games over the last few years, it's going to come up.
And everybody and their mother was trying to get away with it, and some still are even still trying to get away from it.
The you don't see as visceral of a reaction now as you did a few years ago.
Mhm.
But something I've also seen is there's not really a bunch of enthusiasm for getting first party material from the world's most ubiquitous role playing game. I'd say something that doesn't help matters is the price. I think I shared with you how much the PDFs for the 2024 version of that game cost.
Oh, I've seen them all over X, and it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can get other books for the same price, and you can get basically a complete game, more or
When I
less.
reviewed Dragonbane, I pointed out that the core set with that only costs $53,
Hmm.
converting from Swedish kronen to US dollars.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not factoring in shipping and all that, and that's for the physical version. But considering what you get out of that core set, uh, $53 is a steal.
Yeah, because from what I've seen in that core set, it's pretty robust.
Mm-hmm. I can't even say it's the equivalent of like the red box because you have a full multi-session campaign out of it, and a solo dungeon if you want to take that route.
I recall correctly, Dragonbane's Free League.
Yes.
I was about to say they made another game that I kind of had my eye on, but I cannot for the life of me remember what it was called. I know it's Free League. Forbidden Lands, that's what it
Mm-hmm.
was.
Which is basically them taking the Year Zero engine and going dark fantasy.
Hmm.
But we do have this weird thing where the Tailspinner 20 page here is duplicated. I don't know why this was the case, but again, this is a playtest. You get what you pay for. But
Yep.
as he hinted at earlier, you have the concept of diamonds. Um, these are the equivalent of the dots that were in World of Darkness. You have you can fill out 5 of them and then a 6th rank by just drawing a line right through it. The blazons are alert, poise, and speed, which are used for initiative and saving throws. I'd say in this regard, this particular variety of saving throws is less akin to the ability-based saving throws you saw in 5e and more akin to certain predecessors, as well as the defensive stats you saw in World of Darkness.
Mhm.
Ranks is basically level. You have the first 7 levels are as a FangKnight, and the next 7 levels are as a Fang Lord.
So I get the feeling that there's probably going to be, beginner level play and then high level play.
So you know how in some old school um, affairs or the likes of Axe, when you reach a certain level, you're essentially a lord.
Mhm.
That's the approach that's happening here. Uh,
Because I remember in certain like other OSR style games, they brought back the AD&D concept of titles when you reach a certain level.
yeah, there's that, but I'm more referring to like the Conquering King parts of Acts, for instance,
Mhm.
which this is a concept that's been in around since AD&D, but a lot of games kind of half-assed it essentially. But I enjoy that kind of tier-like design. It's part of the reason one of my favorite White Wolf games is Scion, with its 3 tiers of play, or the 3-tier setup you have with the edition I'm supposed to hate, but I don't because the check bounced. I know people say that there's a similar tier setup in 5e. There isn't. It only comes up once and that's it, and I don't count that. If you're not going to put the effort to make me care about it, then why should I? But then, of course, we have armor, which armor is soak, not increased chance to dodge.
So armor works how it's supposed to.
Yeah, I always thought it was silly that somehow plate armor makes you untouchable.
I've never really understood that, because you would think it would ground you in place and reduce damage versus, oh, it just glances off you.
It's one of those things that's an artifact of the wargaming eras.
Yeah.
Where you had to abstract a bunch of different types of armor. But the thing with those kind of artifacts is that as the idea of TTRPGs developed in its own identity, instead of just being war games with plot. I know I've talked about this before. Some of those things became vestigial, and there's this idea of, well, we need to keep these because we've always kept them, which is that design by gospel stuff I've talked about. But then we have damage dice. You roll handfuls of damage dice, because everybody loves their shiny math rocks. Each weapon has 3 or more damage dice, and you need to roll over the target's armor number on each to do 1 HP of damage.
Again, going back to what I was saying about armor doing what it's supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. But because of this setup, it's not just a straight battle of attrition.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not far removed from the fact that you had to roll for damage to actually hit in say World of Darkness, which could result in situations where you'd theoretically do a bunch of damage, but you don't actually do a bunch of damage.
Mm-hmm.
I could see some people calling BS on that, but when you're dealing with a game that is meant to be highly lethal dark fantasy, having as many ways to mitigate damage as possible is inevitable. Unless you want those situations where some random character can die in one hit.
Right.
Like, we've all run Tomb of Horrors at one point. Nobody wants to have that be the standard. But then we have Virtues and Vials, which is exactly what it sounds like. They're rolled kind of as skills in certain areas. You also have Drama Coins and Danger Coins, which is the extra effort mechanic. Rules adding drama. You have the 7 Dwemer, which is the closest thing to a magic system that's in this game, but not really. We'll get to that when we talk about Dwemer in more detail. Obviously, then there's Crux Dice, which is a D6, and it does have its importances, but we won't get to that yet. There's also the concept of moves and zones, because they didn't want to go full grid in the traditional sense. And one thing that I do find interesting regarding minions is stated here. They don't make attack action rolls, and instead, typo there, roll damage when a foe near them fails their attack. But then we get to the Chapter 1 proper, the Bloodless. And it goes, there are 2 great powers standing athwart in Lorne, the mortal quick and the amortal half-dead. One holds fast in the gates to the pits of hell, The other restrains the raging tempest. Only through diligent discharge of both duties can this living world endure unvanquished. The uncanny
So
world...
it's kind of like, I was about to say, so it kind of reminds me of the balance that humans and vampires have in a setting like Nosgoth.
Mhm. Yeah, the uncanny world of the Bloodless is heretical, hierarchical, and homicidal. Though FangKnights are allied with the Crown, they are undead and must feed on mortal blood. The Bloodless must contend not only with their own fiendish nature, but also with mortal foes and other accursed who fear and hunt them. The newly risen Englishman Fangs awaken to a treacherous world where survival demands navigating the labyrinthine hierarchies of bloodlines and covens, locked in an immortal struggle for power and dominance over the Firehold and the Order of the Amarantha. Ruling over all of the ancient and reticent venerates, hidden within their crypts, yet stretching their vile grip over the world. From the shadows, they manipulate younger Fangs as pawns in an intricate web of intrigue, twisted loyalties, and relentless violence, preserving their baleful alliance of convenience with the royal houses. Yet the Ancient Ones can never fully trust their own kin, for their progeny hunger for their power and blood. In this half-life of endless machinations, no one can truly trust another. To the victor goes the blood.
And one thing I'd like to note is if you underestimate the pawns, you've already lost.
There's... As much as I have issues with Game of Thrones, there is one line from Tyrion Lannister that is apropos. Any man who says, "I am king," is no true king.
Exactly.
But, then it goes into the immortal condition. The fact that being a vampire, even if you're a vampiric knight, you do still need blood. Denying it too much can drive you crazy, which is known as the blight madness. That and over drinking blood can also cause you to go crazy.
Yeah.
And being a vampire for too long can have its own consequences as well. But then it goes. We have a bit of the Dwemer and the fact that the blood arcane is a kind of magic adjacent that that vampires can do. And
just from reading it, it feels like that magic to them, at least in this sense, is kind of like a drug.
At
least that's kind of what I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, we have a bit more going into what it means to be bloodless, which is basically one of the terms for these kind of vampires. And in addition to that, we have the different bloodlines, which are exactly what you sound like. We have the Marquisi, the Baspazuk, the Zaluria, the Sturmir, the Kazdar, the Valdin, and the Profugos. And yes, Tiny Wizard, this is a vampire game that isn't Masquerade, made by the guy who made Masquerade.
Not gonna lie, playing a Sturmer sounds like something I would do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with the... And of course, the Covens, which are akin to bloodlines, but have a different attitude of things.
I would say they're more akin to like houses, in a way.
Pretty much. You have the Cavalier, the Soothsay, the Emissara, the Nethrin, the Huntmaster, the Thaumator, and the Injustic. And I guess you could say they're specializations. And a further remark on Blood Arcane. Uh, and again, it would be tempting to call Blood Arcane magic, but that's not entirely the case.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it definitely has some air of mysticism to it, but it is not, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. See, then of course we have a bit of a thing on the becoming, which is how a vampire is made. Essentially, they're put
Which
in a
is
kind of chrysalis.
fucking wicked.
Yeah, this part I want to read in detail. It begins with a sire fully draining and replacing their spawn's blood with a drought of their own blood. This is the greatest ecstasy they will ever feel and begins a blood vomit. Next, Profugo's fans will pull webs from their mouths to roll the spawn in a cocoon of webs called the chrysalis, where the brood remains for 1 moon, after which they're reborn as half-dead and begin to claw their way out of their dangling husk. Any vampire can create a spawn while feeding, but in the Order of the Amarantha, only Fang Lords have the right to do so, and are allowed one only with the consent of the Vestry Council. Spawn feel raging hunger when they crawl out of their chrysalis. They will feel stiffness, body aches, and burning sensations. With no blood left in their body and no understanding of bloodlust, they enter into depravity and may fight over the chained beast or mortal left in the chamber. As the spawn emerge, they begin to explore the chamber they are in, and find and solve the puzzles laid out to allow their escape. In this way, the becoming is a test of savvy and vim. Spawns need to have a powerful will to survive, not all do, and when they fall, a nameless undead crawls from the cocoon instead of a fang. The gathered sires and their knaves often watch the newborn fangs trying to escape the chamber as entertainment. Once they emerge from the hatching room, they're cleaned and welcomed into the firehole. The spawn are added and remember little of their mortal lives, as memory is only restored later. Soon their training begins, and they're taught the ways of their bloodline, later joining a coven to learn duties and a trade.
Now that is just too awesome.
And then we have half dead, half quick, which is the disadvantages of being a bloodless. You know, you are still weak to sunfire. You are still weak to arcane fire. Direct daylight will kill you very quick. Things like an oak stake in your heart will paralyze you. It won't kill you. You just can't move.
Something I actually use with the vampires in my games.
Mm-hmm. You do have to constantly fight the inner beast, the depravity that was mentioned earlier. But on the other hand, you are still immortal. You can regenerate very quickly. Though you can't regenerate wounds from fire or sunlight all that easily. You are immune to cold and heat, to most diseases and poisons, and you don't need to breathe. And of course, a lot of the standard affair that you'd expect.
Mm-hmm.
But then there is Annex Side, which is the art of drinking another fang dry. Essentially, vampiric cannibalism. And in doing
basically a death sentence.
Yeah, in doing so, drawing their mote into their own and therefore stealing their power. Some that has advantages and drawbacks. This is akin to the Diablerie in Masquerade, which the idea with that is you're essentially soul stealing, and doing it is a good way to make enemies very quickly.
Oh yeah.
And the Amarantha, who's kind of the governing body of the Fangs, pretty much not only frown upon it, but doing it very openly is a death sentence. what they refer to at what they refer to as facing the sun. Which I guess you could say you're crucified in one spot and you're not moving until sunrise. In which case, your sentence will be carried out.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I like the fact that the Vampire Society has some sort of form of structure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just like in Vampire the Masquerade.
Yeah. Obviously, the Vestry Council is the senior movers and shakers within Fang cultures.
Tabby's all, you're giving him ideas, I can hear it in his voice. I'm like, Tabby, a lot of this I've already used already.
And
now I can just refine it.
It's not like that. It's not like giving people ideas or expanding is part and parcel of this monastery.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're new to how things work here, Tabby, but you'll learn. But obviously, for a vampire, blood is all. We've all heard the phrase, "the blood is the life." There is a substitute that can be utilized, like Ecor, which Ecor is an alchemized version of it.
So kind of like what Blade uses to not need blood himself.
Yes, the serum.
Yeah.
It allows them to have the feeding without having to directly feed on a given target.
But I'm sure that comes with its own drawbacks as well.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much. And then we have the whole concept of the Maws of Hell. And again, your particular castle, the Firehold, is going to be over one of these maws. And each of the hellholes within it has an abysma, which is a world unto itself, as is mentioned here. So because of that, there's a lot of variety of layouts that you could do with an abysma.
Mm-hmm.
And going deeper is a risk.
Yeah, for them.
And I'd be saying, "Oh, honestly, was only teasing." I know, and I tease back.
So, as far as I'm trying to figure out, them building their castles over these hellholes, are they trying to keep the things inside in, or
Yes.
do they weaponize them?
They're essentially gatekeepers.
Okay, so there's definitely going to be more expansion into this world, and I am here for it.
Mm-hmm. And of course, going into the whole idea of Firehold, which you already saw, a Firehold has its own cheat. Which I will always be fond of whenever a game has a full-on holding system built in, with the holding as having as much character as a character.
Mm-hmm.
But then we have the Amarantha, which I suppose is analogous to things like the Camarilla in Vampire the Masquerade.
So like a major order?
Yeah, they are the ones who enforce the general rules. I suppose another analogy would be things like the Continental Hotel in the John Wick universe.
Love that place.
In the fact that the gold coins are a currency within that place, and the hotels do provide a degree of protection, but there are rules you have to follow.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the cardinal ones is no business on continental grounds.
Exactly.
And hell, in the first movie, we saw what happens if someone breaks the rules. Your membership is revoked. That is the polite way to put it.
Permanently.
The less polite way is to say you get shot.
You don't get shot. You don't just get shot. You get lit the fuck up.
Look, we all know a firing squad when we see it.
Mm-hmm.
And with the Amarantha, they have certain rules that they put on Fangs that are under their protection. But there are factions like the Shadow Vein which do not follow those rules.
I also see that going into the Amarantha rules, more it is kind of it serves as a neutral ground for both Fangs and humans.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. And while they certainly are the big swinging dick politically, they're not absolute, and even within them, there's still just as much politicking as anywhere else.
Oh, for sure. It's just done quietly.
Mm-hmm. Then you have the Severed Treaty, which is basically the edicts
Mm-hmm.
of the Amaranthine. Those being, there shall be two separate magisteria, one mortal and the other arcane, ruled by their own laws. Separate but spliced, each firehold swearing fealty to a mortal crown. Fireholds are allowed to acquire and hold lands. Mortals and Fang Lords and Knights shall not wage war, only engage in jousts and tourneys, and allow safe travel and hospitality for each other.
Sanctioned duels.
Yep. The hospitality thing is important because those of us in the States are familiar with Southern hospitality, which is a successor to Scottish hospitality. And just the general rules of hospitality that were all over Europe for centuries. This idea of if you have guests, you are obligated to feed and house them and generally take care of them and not stab them in the back.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't tell, I'm to looking right at the Campbell clan because even after centuries, some grudges are eternal.
Mm-hmm.
If you need to know the context of what I'm talking about, look up the Glencoe Massacre.
Oh no.
But then envoys shall be sent from fireholds to the royal seat and shall dutifully serve the mortal court. Fangs may not enter a mortal domicile without leave by a resident, and most host emissaries of the crown. Condemned prisoners shall be sent to each new moons from royal dungeon to firehold. So that's how the blood supply comes in. Vampires shall not kill with the kiss, nor feed upon mortals of moral character. Fang Knights may not have progeny, and Fang Lords but one at a time, and only by leave of their elders. Fireholds shall operate universities for noble children, a hostage from each house and clan. Fireholds shall be built over each maw to the abysma, to guard the living from the damned. The Church of the Sacra Prisma shall build no new arks, shrines, or holy sites upon firehold lands. Fang Lords shall govern their lands as vassals of the crown, and in war serve in the warband. The crown will, in times of infernal eruption, come to the firehold's aid with a gathered host. The crown may send Badlander emissaries to ensure the safety of hostages and inspect them all. What each edict and provision means changes by decade by decade, century by century. But you can kind of see that a lot of the edicts are built around mutual agreement, and you do you, we will do us. But if emergencies come, we will be willing to help out as long as the favor is returned.
Mm-hmm.
Which,
so honor and basically creates an even ground for basically everybody.
mm-hmm. Now, granted, there's still going to be inevitable wiggle room with this kind of thing, because that's how it always works within politics.
That, and people will try to find ways to bend or break the rules.
Mm-hmm.
No system is perfect.
Parlay is just a suggestion.
Parlay?
But then we have a bit on Fanglord domains and basically the titles within it. As well as the Arcane Library, which is exactly what it sounds like. And the Hostage Favorites. Fireholds do not demand tribute in gold. They claim something far more valuable, the blood heirs of the realm. These noble scions, known as favorites, are chosen by the crown to reside within the Firehold as both students and hostages, a tradition bound in politics, power, and peril.
Sounds very tense.
Yeah. Though even with the this is the classic concept of noble hostages. In order to ensure an agreement, somebody's kid will be brought to a certain place, but it's not like they're under lock and key. Well, usually.
I guess it would depend on the bloodline and the clan, I guess, in a manner of speaking.
Mm-hmm. But moving right along, we have the Nether Bats. Which are akin to messenger pigeons for FangKnights.
I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, God, these things must be fucking huge.
Mm-hmm. And then the Shadow Vein, who are a cult of renegade fangs. Being a Shadow Vein certainly means you're not playing by the Amarantha's rules, but it also means you're public enemy number 1 as far as the Amarantha is concerned.
So anarchs.
See that then a bit on the Quiet War. Basically, the vampire's equivalent of the Great Game. Then we have the Nameless, who are essentially thralls. And I guess you could say they're akin to zombies, but not without the constant need for brains. But it is amusing that it says there's no healing without a moat, so a maimed or damaged Nameless is simply held together or rebuilt with screws, string, and wire.
And duct tape.
Mm-hmm. When in doubt, duck it.
Yep.
Yeah. And then the Wereborn, who may get their own book in the future, but they are essentially werewolves, and one of the things you need to be very careful about dealing with.
Definitely akin to Vampire the Masquerade's werewolves, where werewolves are incredibly powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And basically can kill a vampire without even a second thought.
Yeah. And of course, you have the Witchen, who I guess would be akin to mages. Hopefully, not as busted as mages.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you also have the Sylphkin, who aren't far removed from changelings. The Ghasts, which I'm pretty is self-explanatory.
Mm-hmm. They're
Eh,
basically super ghosts.
Yeah, and the Badlanders, who would be this game's equivalent of hunters from like Hunter the Vigil or the Reckoning.
I did read ahead in this, and I'm like, oh my goodness, there is a whole world to this, and I am here for it.
Yeah, and we have a big ass lexicon here. And let me before I go on to the next page, let me double check something. Okay, so that is where we're ending off for the time being. So now I've made my stance clear on the matters, but where do you stand from what you've seen thus far of FangKnight?
I am definitely interested to learn more about this, more about the world, the rules, and this is definitely next to the Nosgoth vampires is my second favorite take on vampires.
Mm-hmm. I know that there is a Nosgoth RPG in the works, but I can't explain why. But the fact that it's just a modified version of Morkborg, I find that disappointing. Maybe
I think
under
this could serve as a good substitute.
yeah, for those who want something like now I will note the version of Nosgoth that this is most analogous to is not necessarily the Soul Reaver games, but the Blood Omen games.
Mm-hmm. Particularly Blood Omen 1, I would say.
Yeah, just without some of the weirdness with the way Blood Omen worked in that game.
Mm-hmm.
Though it
I mean, you have to admit it was the first of its kind, too, so.
yeah,
As far as the world.
um I never played the PlayStation version of that. I only had the PC version, and that had some jank moments.
Oh, I played the PlayStation version. It's definitely got its fair share of problems.
Mm-hmm. Though a lot of those problems nowadays have been fixed. Like you
Mm-hmm.
get the version on GOG, and you're not going to have as much of an issue. Uh, and I think there are a few. When we get to character creation next week, it'd be interesting to try and transplant some of the characters from Blood Omen into this.
I'm down for that experiment.
There are a few that I would be interested in doing. Obviously,
Orador?
yeah, because even though he is a complete and total bastard, I still love him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's like one of the eldest vampires, and as Kane described him, he is a bit of a freaking callous prick.
And a hedonist.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he delivers one of my favorite lines after slaughtering 6 of the sheep. I defeated that pathetic shepherd. Since then, our kind has not bothered with the cattle except to feed. And I suggest you do the same.
Mm-hmm. I'd say he's one that I think would be interesting to explore. Another would be Malik.
Ah, the Defender of the Nine.
And to a certain extent, obviously, each of the pillars I could easily see working. And I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up William. Poor William.
William the Just.
And maybe it's just me, but somebody who I think would be an excellent representative of a Fang Lord is Janos.
Janos Ultron. Basically the vampire.
Pretty much. And I know it would be tempting to try and stat out, say, Raziel with this, but I think Raziel would be better suited when the inevitable books on Ghasts come, because he's more.
I was gonna say, since he's basically, I forget what they called him.
A wraith.
Wraith, that's what it was.
Mm-hmm. That is more or less what he is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of the other things, like obviously the Soul Reaver would be interesting to do, though if I was to stat out the Soul Reaver in this, I would use the physical version, not the spiritual version. Not the
one that Raziel has.
Mm-hmm. But I know there might be the question of why bring up Nosgoth in this kind of setup? Because there is a lot of thematic analogies: manipulation, betrayal, loyalty not being rewarded, but the Byzantine manipulators, and the fact that you have layers of manipulation throughout Nosgoth.
Mm-hmm. Not to mention, it would be an interesting way to illustrate the history between vampires and humans, because at one point, vampires basically ruled the world, with humans kind of serving them. But then the humans got a little zealous and turned on all the vampires, and that led to one of the Great Crusades in Nosgoth.
Yeah. And the other reason I wouldn't try and set out the vampire version of Raziel is there's not a whole lot of info to go on with him.
Mm-mm.
I'd say there's more info on when he was a Seraphin Knight, and kind of a bastard.
Oh yeah, and then he freaking became a vampire, and he evolved beyond Cain, and Cain got pissed off.
But that's something we'll end up covering next week. I will say aside from that weird duplicate page thing that I saw earlier, I haven't had too much in the way of issue with what we've gotten so far.
Nope. I have the PDF on my library PC, and that's kind of what I'm going off of.
Yeah, and I will also note that I think the only problem I have so far is the table of contents issue. I understand why it's going to be that way for a while, because again, this is an open playtest.
Yep.
So we've got a lot of teases for what we'll get into later on. But as we get further in, there's going to be a lot more that is being explored. But so far, so good, and we will be returning to this next week. But with that said, as always, a sincere thanks to everyone for taking the time out of their schedule to come all the way to my monastery. And there'll be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
物理を物